Welcome, 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 welcome. Step number 7 in our 10-step series. So many returning faces and names. Welcome back, and some new ones, which is great to see. We've got quite a long list of people today. And yeah, so risk, the 4-letter word that can sink your project. We're going to take a look at risk today, and yeah, we're going to do a little bit of a different format. So let's just get started. Oh, sorry, wrong thing there. There we go. Okay, so again, we'll start off with our logistics this morning. As usual, our hosts, we have the lovely Lauren on technical support, making sure everything's working correct, and myself, David, as the moderator presenter. Keeping in mind, of course, the sound and technology that we're using. If you have any technical issues, especially with voice sync, from the voice sync perspective, just give it a few moments. Usually things start to settle down. If you have any technical questions or issues, just use your texting box to send Lauren a note, and she'll do the best she can. Or you can email her at lauren.connor@titleshift.ca. And if you do have any issues, we'll do our best to sort it out. But again, as always, we record these sessions and provide them afterwards. Just as a reminder, your control panel, there's a little red box at the top there where you can collapse that down to get it out of the way or expand it out to get access to the tools. We have the chat window, so you just click on that little box and bring up your chat window. You can type in questions, etc. And of course, you can always raise your hand. And then finally, as always, this is a very interactive session, so when you see this little icon pop up, that is your turn for input. We've got a number of polls and questions throughout our session today, and I have a slow connection warning. Okay. I think we have a little bit of a technical issue right off the top here. It says slow connection. Would you like to hide all webcams and stop sharing webcam? If you are doing so, I'm going to say no. Let's just keep that going for now. So hopefully things are going to roll okay. Okay, so back to our regularly scheduled program. Now, normally we start off our sessions with a quote. We're going to do something a little different today. We're going to start off with a poll. So our poll, we're going to launch our session today, is when, and keyword there, when should risk management start? So Lauren's going to bring up the poll for you, and I'd like you to choose your selection. So the poll is now open. So go ahead and click on the poll there. I want to choose when you think risk management should start. Awesome. We're getting fabulous response. 53% voted, 60% voted. Wow, this is a real neck-and-neck race here. 70% voted. We'll get to around 80%, 75, 80%, and then we'll take a look at our results. So 74, to give it a few more seconds. Oh. You know, I'm laughing at myself because I was saying it's a real neck-and-neck race, but what I was looking at is I was looking at 4 out of the 5 choices, because one of them is clearly way out ahead at 77%, so 81% voted. So we can just bring the results of that poll. Right? Okay, so really happy to see those results. Actually, 74% of you said initiating during defining the business need, so right out of the gate, right out of the top. Another 11% initiating for charter, so on the initiating phase, we're looking at 85% are saying we need to start our risk management. So yay, you guys, you're right on the mark. Awesome, thank you so much. Yeah, we want to really do our risk management early. Now, another 8% said during planning scope definition, so early in the planning, the early part of the planning, which is good. 5% planning later, and then finally 3% execution, because there's no risk to manage the plan. Now, we want to be cautious with that kind of an attitude, because what will end up happening is you don't think about the risks ahead of time, you don't prepare for them, and then hence they don't get prepared for them, and you're now working in a more reactive than proactive. I'm going to use the who said that we're more thinking around that's when you actively manage risk, you do something about it. Yes, I am preparing during planning and initiating. The approach I like to take is more of a holistic, you know, what does that look like from day one, from the get-go, and how do I kind of manage that all the way through? So great results there. My personal opinion, though, I'm with the 74%. initiating during the business need. How you define your business need, defining the business need is really a form of actually risk management, because without doing that properly, we really create ourselves some kind of serious risks. So let's just move on to the next one. We're going to do a second poll. So how important, in your humble opinion, is effective risk management? And again, we're going to bring the poll up and ask you how important you think effective risk management is. So the poll is now open. And we've got everything from very high to uber low. Wow, fast and furious. 14% already voted. Good job, guys. Okay, this one's actually a neck and neck race. We had 50-50 on two of the choices. 44-50. One of the other ones coming in at 8%, 10%. Interesting. This is good. I'm liking these results. So we got 84% voted. Great. So if you can bring up the results, please, Lauren, that'd be awesome. Okay, so here's the results for a poll. 37% said very high, and actually that was initially, that one was actually well over 50-60%. 55% said high, but there are many factors. So the very high, the single most important determinant factor. The high, there are many factors, but this is definitely right up there. The medium came in at 8%, and then low or uber low said 0%, 0%. So yay, good job, guys. Totally agree. I'm kind of between very high single most determinant factor and high many factors, but this is definitely a biggie. There's a lot of projects I've been on where I've seen risk be the single most determinant factor, but there are other factors, and to really single it out like that, I'm kind of back and forth on that a little bit myself. But I think if I was in your seat, I'd be saying either very high or high. So we combine those two, and we're looking at what is that? 92% of you guys said that, so I totally agree. I think it's, and I think that's also evidenced by the fact that we're here today. Okay, so I just want to share. I'm not going to call it a vacation photo because it wasn't a vacation, but last week I was in Maine, and on my trip to my travel day to my client on the Monday for my Tuesday class, I did a little side trip to Mount Washington. And I drove up. Unfortunately, I didn't have the time to do the hike, which I'm planning to go back and do because it looks like a really good one. So Mount Washington, it's in New Hampshire. So I had a lovely drive through the fall colors, and then got to the Mount Washington Auto Road where you drive up. It's 2,000-meter mountain, about 6,000 feet. And so I'm at the bottom. I sign in. You got to pay your toll and all that. And it's a very steep 8-kilometer drive. It takes you about an hour because you're in first gear the whole way, and it's an interesting drive if you're ever down there. Anyways, they warned me that there was low clouds today and you're going to be in the fog. So I was like, okay, well, no big deal. I'm here anyways. The view will be nice on the drive up. And sure enough, when I got to the top, it was fogged in, but then it would open up for a bit and kind of close down. So I got out of the car, things opened up nicely, and I got this lovely picture looking out towards the north at the mountain ranges. And as you can see, it's above the tree line, so you're up actually into the alpine zone. Then I walked to the other side of the peak of the summit, which is 2-minute walk. Got to the head of the Tuckerman Trail and snapped this photo. Now you notice the timestamps. This is 6 minutes later, and what was happening was I wanted to get a nice clear shot of the Tuckerman Trail because this is where I'm planning to come hiking, and I was going to send this to my hiking friend Albert to say, hey, at the top of the Tuckerman Trail. And I snapped it quickly because the clouds were rolling in. Now, I didn't take another picture, which I'm now regretting that I wish I had, because you see the cairns, which are those little piles of rock. Those mark the trail, and you look at them and think, wow, they're really close together. But that second cairn there that I've circled disappeared about 30 seconds later. And it really kind of made me step back and think, when I first saw them, I thought, wow, they're really close together. And then the clouds rolled in, and I could only see the one. And so I walked up to the first one, and then I could see the second, and it kind of really dawned on me. It's like, there's a good reason why they're this close together, because when I was standing there on the clear day, and there was another trail on the northwest side, so this one's actually facing southwest, where it was still clear as in that first picture, and you could see a fair distance down the trail, and you could see 5-10 cairns down the trail, and they were like really close together. And I thought, wow, this is a really well marked trail. And you can also notice the little white bit of paint there on the rock. And I thought, that's a lot of work for that. And then, as the fog rolled in, it's like, yeah, okay, that's needed. So when we look at that in terms of risk management, You know, I went 100 yards or so down the trail, and you know, you kind of look around and it's all just rock. So if you've done any hiking and you're on a forested trail or a grassland trail, it's easy to find the trail because there's this well-beaten path of dirt, and then there's vegetation. Up there, when you get into the alpine zone, it's all rock. So there is no vegetation. There is no, you know, footprints to follow. It is just rock. And I mean, you're sort of scrambling over these rocks, and without those white painted marks and without those cairns, there is no indication which way you're going. And that fog rolls in, you know, which way is north, south, east, west, you get completely lost. So I kind of reflected back on that, and a quote came to mind, a quote that I've run into many times over the years, which is this: getting to the top is optional, coming down is mandatory. And I have some good friends who are mountain climbers. I'm not a mountain climber. I'm a hiker. I'm a snowshoer. But you know, I've tried it out once or twice. And I really love this quote: getting to the top is optional, coming down is mandatory. And I like to put this in context of project management, because we get so focused on the destination that we forget about the coming down part. We forget about what happens after we deliver. And especially in the latest version of PMBOK, there's lots of discussion, around sustainability, around long-term quality improvement, and things like that. Now, as I said, I've encountered this quote a long time ago: getting to the top is optional and coming down is mandatory. So I did a little bit of research to find out kind of where it came from, and I was actually surprised to discover this gentleman, Ed Visters, and he was the one who first coined this, and it's been a credit to him. And then I kind of looked him up, and he is quite the impressive pedigree. So he is the only American to have climbed all 14 8,000-meter mountains. So there's only 14 mountains in the world that go above 8,000 meters, which is about 26,000 feet. He's the fifth to do so without oxygen, and he's summited these mountains 21 times. So he's been above 8,000 meters 21 times. And the 8,000 meter zone, they call it the death zone, because when you're above 8,000 meters, your body now is literally dying. So it's this is an area that only the extreme climbers usually get to. He's done Everest 11 times. There's only 2 other climbers in the world who have done altitude times. So this is a guy who has a very dangerous realm many times, come back alive, you know, live to tell about it and write about it. And his mantra is going to the top is optional, kind of management. When you think about that, oftentimes we get so focused on the destination that we arrive at the destination and there's nothing left in the tank, right? So we want to be thinking about, you know, from a risk management perspective, how do we not only arrive safely at our destination, but also get back to or continue on, or at least have enough, like I say, you know, fuel left in the tank to be able to kind of, you know, continue on. And this concept was really brought to light last year at the CSCE conference when I sat in on one of the sessions. And the session was delivered by a gentleman named Scott Kress, and his book, Learning in Thin Air, which is a great book, by the way. I'd highly recommend it. And one of the things that really struck me during his session is he quoted this stat, which is 80% of all deaths on Everest happen on the way back down. And what he was doing was highlighting the point where people are not thinking about, you know, what the true destination is. And the true destination when you're in this zone is to make it back down alive. So hence going up is optional, coming down is mandatory. And so of all the people who do make it, or sorry, who die on the mountain, 80% of them actually made it to the top. So when you think about that, if you're going to say, well, hey, let's go climb Everest, what's my destination? We'll get to the top. Well, these people made it. They made their destination, but at what cost? And when we put that into the context of project management, I don't know about you, but I've been on those projects where we have got to the destination, but the cost was so high. I mean, we burnt out the team, we've you know, alienated people, destroyed relationships, you know, things like that. So we end up with a non-sustainable model. And you kind of look at that and say, well, okay, how are we going to now get resources the next time and so forth, right? So, you know, just wanted to plant this thought, what have you defined as a destination? And I've seen this in a number of contexts. I remember a time management one years and years ago, the lady presenting, she's the example of doing a, it was like a greeting card business, and she was a pretty talented cartoonist artist. So her vision was to get her cards on the store shelves. which she managed to do. Didn't sell any of them, right? So the vision really should have been to have a successful business doing that. So she obtained her goal. So, and her point was, really focus, when you focus on what the goal is, you can obtain your goal, and then there's nothing left after that, right? So hence, I really like to look at the goal, especially when we're talking in terms of risk management, is, coming back down, right? So the goal is not to get to the top, it's to come back down alive. Now, if you're gonna try to do an attempt on Everest or some other lofty goal like that, yes, the goal is to get to the top, but not at the expense of not coming down, right? So we want to really kind of blend that. And we're gonna visit some ways around that. So as we do, we're going to look at the challenges from our first session. And I've been highlighting 2 or 3 of these for each of these, and I kind of started to look at these and I said, well, let's see, scope creep, communications, net requirements, getting support. That's in context of risk management. Yeah, I think they're all there. So I just thought, yeah, that's it. We're just highlighting the whole page. So it really does speak to how risk management is very holistic in this process, and this is why I wanted to start off with the question of when do we start it. And my humble opinion, right at the beginning. Right? You want to be thinking about that right at the beginning, as well as throughout. Your risk response or your risk register, your risk management plan, these need to be living and breathing documents. You need to be updating them as we go. Okay, so, oops, I see a little mistake there. Step 6, I didn't update the number. We have a risk event. All right. See, this is what happens when you're doing this in the evenings after a class. Okay, so our step name is correct. Identify, analyze, document risks and responses. And the neat thing with this is we're putting the 10 steps together initially years ago. You want to do a short title, define scope, right? This one, though, is like, we could have just said risks or risk management or, deal with risks or something like that. We thought, no, you know what, it really deserves this. Identify the risks, analyze the risks, document the risks, and then figure out your responses. Now, that's the process. Our time together today, though, I'm not going to focus on process. I'm going to focus more around the interpersonal skills, the leadership side of things, and the team side of things, because in my humble opinion, that's where you're really going to get your big bang for the buck. The process is actually pretty simple, right? We figure out what are the risks, we identify them, we analyze them. There's the classic probability and impact matrices. We write all that down, we document it, we look at what is the causes, potential causes, we look at our responses to that. Are we going to mitigate, are we going to accept, are we going to avoid, are we going to transfer? So that part's all there, and you know what, it's well documented in PMBOK and many other sources, and I didn't want this to become another, hey, let's go through that, classic process thing. So I'm going to just focus more around the leadership side of this. Step 7, again, just highlighting within our process. So the next question I want to ask is, what is your biggest barrier in implementing effective risk management? And this one's going to be a question, so very choppy, can't hear everything. Okay, thanks, Daryl. We'll slow it down a little bit. Sorry, I know it's a very exciting topic for me, so I tend to talk quickly. All right, what is your biggest barrier to implementing effective risk management? So I'll give you a few moments. And thank you for the comments back on the audio. We will do what we can to fix that. Okay. So using your chat windows, if you just want to answer that question, what is your biggest barrier for implementing effective risk management? There we are. We're getting some question answers in. Biggest barrier is ownership and accountability from Jacqueline. Thank you. I totally agree. Knowing the business. So yes, if we don't know the business well, very hard to effectively manage our risk. Not knowing all of the moving parts from Sharon. Yes, and that can be very difficult when we've got a large, multifaceted project. When we talk in terms of what is your role as a project manager, it's often mainly around integration and bringing everything together. I love this one. Viewed as an onerous process with little benefit, so hence you get no buy-in. Oh yes, Paige, so agree with you. We need to really change the image of risk management away from being onerous, but also away from the little benefit piece. I'm gonna come back to that in a moment. Just grab some of the biggest barrier for me is ramping in, similar to pages comment from the client, whether they need it or not. Changes in scope. Justin, I'm not really sure what you mean there. If you could expand on that a little bit, would be great. Accountability from Elizabeth, yes, 100%. Everyone having to agree with priority. Oh, yes, Roberta, totally, yes. And one of the challenges I see there is we have different risk tolerances. So each individual person, we have our own risk tolerance. Kind of a little bit of a funny story. I was actually voted most likely to die of my graduating class. They started in category. On my 17th birthday, I had my car license, my motorbike license, my pilot's license. I was out there just, doing stuff, and people always figured I was going to die in a fiery crash one day. Knock on wood, I'm not there. I'm still here. My wife, on the other hand, is a belt and suspenders kind of gal. And so I credit her with keeping me alive, and she credits me with getting, more adventurous. You want to find that balance. Sometimes it's difficult because our own personal views come in around how much risk we're willing to take, and so we get into this whole discussion around risk tolerance. Okay, so lack of communication with others. Understand what risk is. Yeah, communication always a challenge. Hence, I highlighted kind of everything. Oh, here this thing very choppy. Sorry, let me slow down a little bit. Risks do not get any ear. Oh, that's interesting. Any ear until they happen, and it generally adds cost. Yeah, so people just don't want to consider the risk. They don't want to think about it. Oh, there's a response from Justin. Changes during the project that will initiate other possible risks. Yes, absolutely. Risk management needs to be part of your change control process. So as you are managing your change, you're going to need to manage the risks of that change. Cannot hear, very choppy. Okay, so I'm going to turn off my webcam for a bit. And since we had the warning about low bandwidth, maybe that will help. So just let me know if the audio improves. Team members take risk very lightly, do not realize the severity. Yes, thank you very much. And that actually can be a couple of things. First of all, it can just be their own personal risk tolerance level, but it can also be the fact that I'm in one corner of the project and I don't necessarily realize the impacts that the actions in my corner of the project are having on the whole project. Yeah, beautiful. Risk management is always dumped when the PM is dumped on the PM for accountability. Yeah, when it should be a team effort. Beautiful, Raymond. Love it. Absolutely. Okay, there's the last one here, and also the person who raises the possible risk often viewed as a naysayer. Oh, thank you so much. Yay, Sarah. Risk management, good effective risk management is an enabler. It is not a naysayer, disabler thing. Okay, we need to change that viewpoint, that focus. And the reason that I say this is I've worked on some extremely high-risk projects, and I've seen what happens when, so there was two projects in particular. They're both research and development projects that were done. These were literally the first time in the history of man that these things were being done. The first one was approached with a very risk-managed approach, and it went exceptionally well. Like, historically speaking, we only had one major failure when normally there would be hundreds of major failures, which was, incredible. The second project, we started out that way, but then we fell victim to competitive pressures, and we abandoned our risk culture, and literally things came crashing to the ground. We then reestablished our risk managed culture and flew to success. So it is tough because it is often viewed as the naysayer and the negative, and oh, don't jinx us and this kind of thing. It's not about jinxing. It's about enabling. It's about making sure that we know what's coming down the pipe. We're prepared for it. We've taken potentially proactive corrective actions, or at least we have a plan ready to respond should it occur, a contingency plan. And when we think in those terms, what we're doing is we're enabling the project to move forward. Now, this is going to tie back to a comment earlier that I wanted to loop back to, which is the concept of risk management is often a pendulum effect. So here's what happens. You do a really good job of managing the risk on your project. So things go well. And then on your next project, when you say, I want to put in cost and time. I want to increase my budgets to cover risk. Your sponsors say, you don't need to do that. Your projects go well. There's no risk on your project. Well, there wasn't risks manifesting because you were dealing with them. And then, of course, your budgets get slashed and your timelines get slashed. And then the risk events occur and they go, oh, crap, we better manage risk and put some resources to that. So we end up with this sort of pendulum effect where things go well, so they shave our budgets, and then things go badly and they put resources to it and so forth. The biggest challenge is we don't know what we prevent. So what ends up happening is we end up preventing risks, and then hence we get this perception that we don't have risks, right? And we always have risks. It's just whether they're occurring or not. Now, what can we do about them? So again, I would like you to, in your question box, put in some of your comments. What do you think? So we've just looked at a number of barriers that we're facing. Let's hear from you guys. What do you think? Oh, and if someone can comment on how the audio is going, did the turning off of the webcam help? Better without webcam. Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. So we'll keep the webcam off for this session. Sorry, guys. It's actually probably a good thing I need a haircut. So a couple of people are saying the audio is better. Great. Interesting comment, Jacqueline. So Jacqueline says, I didn't think it would work to turn off the webcam, but it did work. So I'm going to tie that comment back into our risk discussion. So potential risk, we have internet troubles, right? So one of the contingency plans that I always have in place when doing these is you unload. And as a proactive thing, I've actually turned off other features of my laptop that I normally have on that use bandwidth. So to try and help manage that. So there's a bit of mitigation, and there's also a contingency plan here. Yeah, it's great. Empower the team to take ownership. Yes, Jacqueline, absolutely, and that's a very good one. This isn't the sole rights of the project manager, or if you've got a large project and you have actually a risk manager assigned. Yeah, make it a whole team process. What I like to say is you want to try to make it the culture of the team that you're going at this with a managed risk. Need to formalize change process and include leadership in the decision. Yes, Diane, and I think the key one there is including the leadership in the decision. Sarah, trying to position risk management as positive language. Oh, 100%. We throw that word risk out, everyone thinks negative. And in my classes, I often talk about positive risk versus negative risks, and a lot of people just really hard time wrapping their head around the concept of a positive risk event. Okay, so we got questions coming in, or comments coming in fast and furious here. Ramesh, periodic risk register review, 100%. I mean, we don't want to discount the process, but process that is not lived and not felt, and I mean, you got to live the blues, right? If it's not felt, it's not going to be lived, and it's not going to be followed. I'm just going to publicly share out another comment. James says, I can't see the other comments. Our software doesn't allow that, so that's why I'm kind of reading them off. So if you are looking for other people's comments, they're not there. Okay. Demonstrate the benefits of risk management. Yes, absolutely, and your lessons learned is a fabulous vehicle for that. I'm going to give you another vehicle for that, Jacqueline. It's called a heat map. Now, if you've never worked with a heat map before, just Google heat map and you'll find them. Basically, a heat map is your impact probability matrix, but instead of listing a single risk and then analyzing it, you list multiple risks. And what you do is you after you've done your individual analysis, you put all of those individual analysis together into a single chart. So in the high corner, you might have the number 5, which represents 5 risks, and medium high, you've got 7, and so on. And the neat thing with the heat map is you do this before and you do this again after your mitigation and contingency planning is done. And what you should see happening is you should see the risks migrating from the upper right-hand corner to the lower left-hand corner of that chart, so that you see them going from the high highs down towards the low lows. And that can also help justify some costing. Okay. Now keep in mind, you want to do your risk assessments in the context of the environment that you're working within. So if you're, for example, in an IT world and you have standard processes, excuse me, you have standard processes around, for example, testing before you roll into production and things like that, then you want to do your risk assessments with those already in mind, right? So this isn't a, what would it look like without those, you know, what does it look like within our environment, and then you layer on additional mitigation and additional contingency over and above to bring the ones that are above your threshold down within acceptable levels. For lessons learned from other projects, oh yes, Roberta, thank you so much. There's a mantra in the world of risk management safety, which is learn from the mistakes of others, because we're not going to live long enough to make all the mistakes ourselves, right? Now, in our world, as project managers, when we have a risk event occur, you know, usually no one dies. Depending upon the industry you're in, sometimes people's lives are on the line when it comes to your projects. So if you're into construction, or you know, if you work with nuclear energy world and the aviation world, and you know, when things go wrong there, you can have some very serious consequences. So yeah, learn from the mistakes of others, absolutely. Effectively communicate the risk and the impacts. Yeah, communication's a huge one, Daryl, totally agree. Oh, and then there's Mary's comment right behind, communicate, communicate, communicate. Yeah, absolutely. Even when the key parties do not seem to be listening. Yeah, you know, absolutely, totally agree. And then the last one, have a couple of touch points throughout the project to ensure this is being addressed. Totally agree. And those touch points can be formal and built into the schedule, but they should also be available and reactionary. So if things are starting to go off the rails, it might be time to take a step back and readdress the risk management, which is actually what we did in that second project that I was referring to, where things did seriously go off the rails. And we immediately got an email from the project lead, said, you know what, we're going to back off, give us a list of all the risks, we're going to reassess this and, you know, restart. And that was in the wake of that failure. So yeah, good stuff, good stuff. All right. So what can we do about it? Now, what I want to do at this point is move into some of my take on what we can do about it. And it's going to echo some of the comments that were being said. I would be remiss if I didn't give you at least one tool. So I want to give you a tool that we don't typically see in PMBOK, and this is based on the chain theory of major incidences or risk events. When you're looking at any complex system, a risk event rarely is the result of a single cause. There's usually a number of different things along the way that sort of build up. Now, we also have a number of different barriers at different places for different effects, okay? So, for example, if I'm writing code and I'm going to run this code into production, I might first of all vet the contractor, the coder that I'm about to hire, right? Maybe check their references, things like that. So there's my first barrier to prevent bad code from going into production. I might then do a peer review. I maybe have 2 or 3 people work together so that they can collaborate. So there's my next barrier to prevent bad code coming into production. Then I might do some business acceptance testing, and then some production acceptance testing. So we're into like BAT and PAT and, you know, those kind of things. So I might have a couple different types of testing. And in this slide here, what I have is, and we call this the Swiss cheese model. So this is by Jason Reason in 2000. The Swiss cheese model basically says, I'm going to put a number of barriers in place to prevent, when the chain of events starts, to prevent it from coming through to fruition. Well, every barrier is going to have holes. Okay, so here we have, you know, 4 barriers. The holes happen to line up, and the risk event occurs. Now, if I can be more effective in my barriers, I can actually prevent it from happening. So I can catch the mistake partway through. And this is the concept. This concept is kind of synonymous with triggers. So if we think about PMBOK and we think about the, you know, the standard things we tend to talk about when it comes to risk management, we talk about triggers, and the trigger is to activate our contingency plan, and it's an indicator to say the risk event may occur or is getting more likely to occur. And it's the same thing here, where each of these barriers, if we pay attention to those triggers, those indicators, that can actually be an effective barrier for us to say, wait a second, we need to stop this, and we can break that chain, right? So we talk about breaking the chain. And both of these concepts, having the effective barrier and having the triggers and listening to those, as I like to say, listen to the whispers, you don't have to hear the screams. So if we can listen to those subtle things, then we can take corrective action early before the risk event actually occurs. So, using the example of my supplier who's going to deliver late, right, is my risk event. So I identify the risk event as supplier delivers late. Well, then I look at, okay, what are the indicators coming down the pipe that my supplier is going to deliver late? And I watch for those indicators, and then I react early. So it's kind of like using these barriers. And I put multiple barriers in place, like checking them out and doing communications and maybe shipping early and so forth. And when one of those barriers is effective, doesn't matter which one, but one of them is effective, we've broken the chain and we've prevented that risk event. So what can we do about it? Communication popped up a number of times, and totally agree with Mary there. Communicate, communicate, communicate. But we need to make sure that it is open communication and it is honest communication. And here's where it gets tricky, folks. Risk, and especially when risk events happen and become issues, we get into the blame game. We get into the, why did this happen? Who's responsible? Things like that. We really want to be careful about doing that. And it's often not intentional. So think about this. One of the key things we want to do when a risk event occurs, or when we identify risk, is we want to, basically ask the simple question: what's the cause? Why did this happen? So I want you to put yourself in the scenario. You're walking into a meeting. You've had a major risk event just occur on your project. Tempers are kind of a little bit high. People are a little bit stressed, and you walk in as the PM into your team, 20 people sitting around the table, and you said, "Why did this happen? What's the cause?" Now, pop to the other side of the table for a moment in your mind. You're a team member on that team, and your PM's just come in and said, "Why did this happen? What's the cause?" The knee-jerk reaction for most people is, "Oh crap, he's looking to blame someone. He's looking for a scapegoat. He's looking for a fall guy." So this is where the open and honest communication part comes in. You want to be very careful how you phrase and how you navigate these waters. You want to take this forward as, we've had a risk event occur. We want to prevent reoccurrence. We want to fix this and move forward. So to prevent the reoccurrence, we need to understand why. Don't care who. It's not a fault issue. We want to figure out, what happened. Let's put a preventative in place here. So we got to figure out why, so we can prevent it, and we move forward. We all want the project to succeed. We'll learn from it, and we'll move forward. In my humble opinion, the only true mistakes are the ones you don't learn from. So this is the open and honest part. Don't shoot the messenger. Try to build a culture within your organization, within your team, that is encouraging and rewarding the behavior of bring the issues and challenges and risks forward early. Because if you find out about them early, you're far more able to be able to deal with it. And we call this being out in front of the project. So you're out in front, you're ahead of where the project is, anticipating what's coming down the pipe. So if you get told early what happened, reward that behavior. Now, you might be saying, "Well, I don't shoot the messenger." Well, you might not be shooting the messenger, but you might be reacting in an annoyed or frustrated fashion, and the person who just delivered you the news gets that immediate reaction. So it can be very easily perceived that you're annoyed at me for delivering that news, when meanwhile you're annoyed at the news, you're not annoyed at me, right? So you want to be very careful around that. Learn from our mistakes, totally agree, right? Lessons learned, key. Only true mistakes are the ones we do not learn from. Now, it's like kind of looking at, what would be a good effective thing here, and I always go back to realistic assessment. We as beings are emotional beings. Okay, we like to think we're logical. We definitely have a logical side to us, but we are, at our hearts, emotional beings. So we often assess, and if we look at our innate fear response, our innate fear response is designed to deal with immediate and visible threats, and we tend to get a very emotional response, and hence we do an emotional assessment. So, for example, I have a real fear of spiders. So you know what? If you ask me what's the danger rate on spiders, for me it's higher, right? Someone who loves them and let them crawl over them all day, yeah, no problem. So, we want to be realistic on our assessments, and this is hence why we have the quantitative the qualitative assessment, which is our emotional assessment, and then the quantitative assessment, which is the numbers. What are the true numbers here? We also then get into things like representativeness heuristics, where if I have a close representation of that event, I will judge it as more likely to happen. We get into things like optimism bias, where we think we're better than we are and the bad things aren't going to happen to us, and when they do, they're not as bad as we think. So I want to be, let's try to dial some of those back and try to get, let's put our Spock brain in, and let's be, logical here and look at the realistic assessment. And then, as we've been talking, be proactive. Okay. So I'm going to give one more poll, and the poll question is, what is the biggest killer? So we're going to give you 4 choices, and I want you to rate what you think is the biggest killer of people. So the most number of people who die, basically. And it's a very, very uplifting subject, isn't it? .22% voted. Oh, and the vending machine piece, by the way, that's vending machines falling on people. All right, so we're getting 61% voted. 69% voted. Wow, we got a clear leader here. This is good. You guys are pretty smart. A lot of you are voting correct. 84%. All right. So let's take a look at these poll results. So 76% said ladders. Yay, you got it right. That is actually the #1 killer of these 4 items from the stats that I found in the United States. Number 2 was vending machine, according to you guys. It was actually mowing the lawn, so 7% said mowing the lawn, and then 5% said shark attack, which, yeah, shark attack, not that common. Uh-oh, sorry, we just had a little shark attack there. Yeah, I know, very cheesy. So the actual stats, and I got this off of mentalfloss.com. In the continental U.S. in a year, on average, 1 person dies from shark attacks. 113 from falling off ladders, 75 mowing lawns, and 11 from vending machines actually falling on them. And that's actually a 30-year average too. So we did it over many years. And then I included the worldwide of sharks, which is only 6. And it's one of those things where it makes good story for the newspaper, right? So you look at, how many people die in particular scenarios, and what ends up on the front page of the paper, what ends up in the, in the back page, or not even in the paper at all, right? So unfortunately, airplanes, front page, right? Now you look, there are 3 billion people. There's over 3 billion people a year who fly, and yet the numbers are in the 1 to 200 range. And yet in the continental U.S. with over 30,000 dying in car accidents, and it's not even mentioned. So we get this disproportionate perception of what is a risky activity and what isn't. So next time you got to go climb up the ladder to put the Christmas lights on, be thinking you probably should be down in the sunny south in the ocean swimming, because it's safer. So that's going to be my take, and talk to your spousal unit and see if you can sell that as your reason for the next vacation. All right, so what can we do about this? You know what? Create a positive risk culture. And I think culture is really the best word for this. It's the honest, open communication. It's the effective, so the objective evaluation. Establish your risk tolerance. Do that at more of a team level. Be out in front of your project, hence being proactive, and then constantly reevaluate. And I like to use the word culture when I talk in terms of risk, because you really need to live it. You need to be there all the time, every day, thinking about that. Now, the other big bullet I put in here is build team resilience. And what I'm talking about when I talk about resilience is the team's ability to bounce back. So it's not a question of, are you going to have risks on your project? It's really a question of which risks. And if you build a really resilient team, they're gonna roll with the punches. They're gonna be able to deal with the things that pop up, right? And this goes back to Learning in Thin Air, the book that I mentioned earlier by Scott Kress. And it basically chronicles his successful attempt of Everest. But the first half of the book is his unsuccessful attempt at Choyu, and Choyu is a 8,000 meter mountain. So this was his first time going up into the 8,000 meter zone. And Choyu is about 8,100 meters, so it's a good mountain. if you're first time going into the 8000, because you're just poking above it a little bit. You're starting to experience now, finding out what's kind of involved before you tackle the much higher Everest. And he had an unsuccessful attempt at Choi Yu, and that really kind of broke his spirits and kind of said, you're probably not Everest material. And then he reflected back on his experience, and he really identified it was the team, the breakdown of the team. So when he put his Everest team together, he was a lot more selective around that, and a lot more, how do I build the team and how do I build team resilience? And what's really interesting in his book is he outlines the challenges, and he had some very unusual challenges the year that he went up. And pick up the book and you can find out all about it. But some very unique challenges, and his team made it to the top. I'm not going to say easily, but they were it went well, where many other teams fell apart. And in his book, he chronicles, how his team stayed together and actually enjoyed themselves and had a fun time, while other teams were just falling apart and bickering and not making it to the top. And in an environment like that, you can't have that breakdown of the team, right? So put together that good team, build that resilience in. When the issues crop up, you're going to find that you have a lot of ability to inherently, naturally deal with that. And you can put all the process you want in place. You don't have that resilience, you don't have that team dynamic, things are going to fall apart, right? You get into blame gaming, you get into all kinds of stuff. So someone's asking, can you repeat the name of the book? 100%. Let me just actually zoom back to it real quick. It's called Learning in Thin Air. There it is. And it's Scott Kress, K-R-E-S-S. What I'll do is I'll give you a link to his site that Lauren can include with the recording, and then you can touch base with him if you're interested in picking it up. And that's where we were. Awesome. Yeah, and fortunately it's one of those kind of small publication things. He's actually a local boy from Oakville. You need to contact him to get a copy. So yeah, tell him I sent you. All right. Okay, sorry, there's a question that's come in. Do you have any comment on highlighting too much risk? I have seen projects canceled as there was too many risks identified and associated costs during the initial business phase discussion from Mahesh. Yes, I do have some comments on that. So, first thing is highlight lots of risks. That's actually a very good thing. Now, your assessment of the risk becomes the key. And when we talk in terms of risk responses, one of the risk responses is accept the risk, aka do nothing. And I often get into some really great discussions with people around this, thinking this is not good risk management, because you're doing nothing about the risk. But it actually is very good risk management, because you need to look at the cost benefit of doing anything or something about that particular risk. So hence, if it's too expensive or too costly, or there's just simply not the return, much like a project overall, you're not going to address that risk. Now, there are some risks where we say we can't live with them, we can't cost benefit mitigate them. So we now have to ask the question, should the project go ahead? And at this point, you want to be thinking in terms of, does it fit within our risk profile to move ahead with this project, to give us the benefit that we're looking for that cost level? Or is this project too risky and we should either change the plan and avoid the risk by doing something completely different, or cancel the project? And canceling a project because there's a lot of risk there is not necessarily a bad thing. The challenge with risks is there's a big unknown, because they may or may not happen. So we then have to ask the question of, is the cost benefit there? The cost benefit for me going to the top of Everest, it's not there. Love to do it, be kind of cool. Been up in the Alpine Zone a couple times in different mountains, done a lot of hiking, a little bit of rock climbing. It's kind of neat, but I'm not that uber keen on doing that. So yeah, that's not for me. The cost benefit's not there, right? Now for my buddy Dave, who makes his living as a rock climber instructor, he's totally all over that. Given the opportunity, he would invest the money and put the resources to it, much like many people do. So it's how you assess the risks. right? And then you want to ask that very serious, honest question of, does it make sense to move forward? And I've seen the other end of that spectrum where people didn't accept or did not assess the risks, move forward, things went off the rails. They then rescheduled and replanned and rejigged and kept going towards what they appeared to be was the end state, but with much higher risks. And the benefits were out of whack now. And on one or two occasions, I've actually kind of paused those people and said, okay, let's take a step back and let's reassess. Should we be continuing down this plan? And I'm thinking of one scenario in particular where we made the decision not to, and I think it was the right decision. So yeah, it can be a little bit annoying sometimes when projects get canceled, but we also got to remember that, maybe this was the wrong thing. And it does come back to how you assess the risk. So if you come up with 100 risks, there's probably going to be 3 or 5 or 10 that you're going to mitigate, and then 80, 90 you're going to accept, which is fine. And then you decide, are we going to move forward with the project? So I don't necessarily think, Mahesh, that that's a negative when your project gets canceled because there's too much risk. It might be that maybe you're a little bit more risk tolerant and your sponsor was a little bit more risk adverse and you didn't agree with the decision. Okay? As PMs, we're the doers, or not the doers, we're the executors, we're the facilitators. They're the decision makers, right? So when things go south, as much as we might get some flack, sponsors, senior management, they really have to live with it. So that's kind of my thoughts when you highlight too much, right? Because I'd much rather get to the end of a project having canceled it and said, we identified all these risks and it's not a good idea, than get to the end of the project going, we didn't identify these risks, it bit us, and yeah, this was not good. Now to close that discussion, I want to tie it back to the very beginning question, which is when should you start? And that's around the business need. And this is key, because what ends up happening is we often start our project at the thing phase or the what phase, at the product phase or the product identification. And when we haven't gone back to the original need, it's very easy to get into the product phase, have risks appear, rework the product or the thing until we get to something that kind of works within the risk framework that we want, but now we've lost sight of the need. And starting kind of here somewhere, and then we've reworked the product until we're now somewhere way over here, and we've kind of lost sight of the need. So those are kind of a little bit of a long answer, but I think that was an important question. So thank you very much for that question. Almost out of time, so I'm gonna whip through the case study real quick. Back to put this into a context. Acme case study: sell off the division, relocate the office. Right. Purpose was to reduce dollars. So again, going back to the need, minimal interruption to operations, another key need, and help the staff with their transition. So from a risk mitigation perspective, we're going to layer in change management. And this goes back to leadership. This goes back to how are my team going to work through this? What's their impact? So if we think about the need of, we need to keep the doors open and keep the lights on. Communication, again, that popped up. Open and honest, let the staff know what's going on, provide multiple venues, or provide multiple vehicles of communication. So some people prefer, I'm a chatty guy, I like to sit and talk to someone. So if you're going to explain to me about what's going on, buy me a coffee and let's go sit and chat. My wife, she'd much prefer to receive an email and have it written. We just, each person has their own benefit, or their own styles. Then I put listen in here, because listen is a highly underrated form of communication. When listeners listen, talkers talk. So if you want to find out what's going on, if you want to receive information, shut up and listen. All right, support your staff during the transition, and of course, do that team building, because that is the team's what's going to get you through, right? And the team will help pull stuff out when when the stuff's hitting the fan. You want a good solid team behind you, because that's what's going to get you through. So some key points here to kind of round out our session today. Risk management is an enabler. People often look at, when you start saying we're going to have a risk management section, oh, here comes the naysayers, here comes all the negative Nellies, right, all that kind of stuff. It is an enabler. It's about getting the job done. It needs to be a way of life. This is not an event. This is not a, hey, let's schedule our risk management session for Tuesday and then boom, we're done. No, this goes on and on and on, right? So there should be a repeat at the end of that, right? Lather, rinse, repeat, right? Yeah, repeat, repeat, repeat. Risk register is a living, breathing document. So your risk management plan, your risk register, it needs to be living, breathing. It needs to be updated constantly. Manage your sponsors, or sorry, manage to the sponsor's risk tolerance. So this goes back to Mahesh's question. We might not necessarily agree with it, but you know what? They're the decision makers, right? So let's manage to their tolerance level. So I have to dial mine back a bit because I tend to be a little bit of a risk taker. I like to go do things. It's taken me a lot of years to really accept that first bullet point, that risk management's an enabler, not a preventer, because I'm like, no, don't prevent me from doing stuff. Enable me to do stuff, move forward. And the more I learn about risk management, the more I realize that, you know what, good, effective risk management allows me to do those things, right? Allows me to go out and you know, explore and do that stuff. And finally, be as objective as possible. So when we get into quantitative versus the qualitative, you know, personal opinions aside, things like that. And this brings us right back to our friend, Ed Visters. And when you think about it, when you look at his long, impressive resume of what he has accomplished in a zone that is exceptionally dangerous, and he's lived a long, full life, he has approached it from a standpoint of how do I use risk management to enable me to do those things, right? And this is what I see in many different industries, and many different leaders in those industries or areas where they're doing, you know, highly dangerous, highly you know, risky things, and living to that you know, ripe old age. And it's all about how do I manage the risk to enable me to go do those things, not to prevent me from doing those things, but to enable me to do those things. And there are some things we shouldn't be doing, which is kind of what it all boils down to. So